What is the best SMG in the Division 2? Well, the Banshee has been brought up as a contender. And so we're going to take a close look at the weapon and see if it's actually the best SMG in the game. And there are standard metrics out there like burst and sustained DPS to help guide you. However, these stats leave a lot for the imagination, making it easy for players to jump to conclusions. Let's figure out why.
And if you don't know, now you know.
We had a special release called Project Resolve that pretty much went around and touched everything in the game and rebalanced a lot of the weapons, including SMGs. This fellow posted in the comments not to forget about the Banshee, that it's an SMG worth leveling up. And I've heard that several times, and I think I gave this thing a try early on in the season when the Project Resolve dropped, but I figured we'd go back at it and take a closer look at this SMG and see if it is as good as what some of these people are saying. And I'll be honest with you, there's really not a bad SMG in the game. Well, there's a couple. But that aside, the changes in SMGs are, like most of the weapon differences in the Division 2, they're all incremental. So from one SMG to the next, you're just getting differences in base damage, RPMs, mod slots, mag size, and for the most part, reload time. And as you rate these things based on, let's just say, burst DPS, as you go up the scale from worst to best, you're not going to see vast differences in the stats from one SMG to the next. So it's just a shift in stats. So I think the question we're really asking here is, what is the best SMG in the Division 2? That's easy. It's the Ouroboros Exotic SMG. It's really hard to deny that. It's got a gigantic 50-round mag and a 1.4 second reload. That's insane. And then it sits at number 1 for burst DPS and also sits at number 1 for sustained DPS. It's basically number 1 in every department. But you know what's crazy about that? It doesn't have a damage talent. So it's sitting at number 1 without activating any extra damage from the talent. So that's insane, right? All you got to do is point and shoot. Okay, but here's the deal. Not everybody has the Ouroboros, and not everybody is going to get it. The only way to get the Ouroboros is by completing the Incursion, a group play game mode. But there's a lot of people that don't fancy playing incursions or raid type gameplay. That's all understandable. So you're gonna wanna know what is the next best SMG to run? And that's a darn good question. So let's go to the sheets. What do they say? As of now, the top 5 SMGs in the game starts with the Ouroboros Exotic SMG, which is the Tactical Vector SBR 9mm in its exotic form, and then the Tactical Vector non-exotic, the MP7 and its named version, the Swap Chain, then the Banshee, the SMG in question, and its named version, the Grudge, and then finally, the Tommy Gun. Yes, I said the Tommy Gun. Yeah, it baffles me too. My mind still blows just to think that this weapon is on any list whatsoever. But remember, burst DPS is base damage before damage talents and your build. But for sustained DPS, the list looks a little bit different. You have the Ouroboros, the Tommy Gun, the M1928, which I enjoy, the Police T821, its friend, the Black Market T821, and then the AUG A3 Para XS. If you want to see a comprehensive list of all the SMGs and how they stand against each other, check out this video done by McGuns. I think he did a really good job summarizing the changes from Project Resolve early in the season. So with all that being said, let's just go ahead and take the Ouroboros off the table. We know it's the best SMG in the game. It's an exotic SMG. So let's ask the question a different way. So what is the best non-exotic SMG in the game? How about that? Now, for me, the Tommy Gun, it's just not even worth it for me. I feel like I can't hit the broadside of a truck with that thing, even when I'm shooting at it point blank. It's just all over the place, which is the perfect example of how things don't translate from paper to practice. So it's great that the Tommy Gun makes the list for best burst DPS SMGs in the game, but on paper, shots on target isn't a factor. In the game, shots on target is a factor. And it's all the difference, really. So in all reality, the list is shorter when it comes to the real competitors for the best SMG in the game. We're gonna be looking at the Tactical Vector, the MP7, the Banshee, and the Dark Winter. So what is the best non-exotic SMG in the game? And the question is, can it be the Banshee? So we have a little over 1,000 RPM. That's healthy with the 52 round mag, very nice. I got crits on my mods, 20 rounds in the mag, more crit chance, and then more crit chance. I got damage to targets out of cover on mine. No expertise, but I do recommend at least 12%. 2.1 second reload time, not my favorite. A decent drop off, typical for SMGs. And I decided to just go with Killer to get that 40% extra critical hit damage for 10 seconds. Keep in mind, this thing doesn't run the TAC laser pointer, so the talents that require a pulse aren't necessarily gonna have the best uptime with this SMG, such as Flatline. So for today's test, you could choose any of the top 5 SMGs that you like. I'm gonna use use the name vector, the Dark Winter, as it means for comparison. It's almost hitting at 1400 RPM with 45 in the mag. Its reload is a little bit faster, and then it's got perfect killer. So remember, those burst DPS stats don't bring talent into consideration. On paper, the Dark Winter is really good, and in gameplay, it's really good. It's one we're very familiar with. It's a crowd favorite. People rely on this weapon. That's the perfect segue to the topic at heart, which is the translation from paper to practice. The other really important question we're addressing in this discussion: how much does the difference in damage on paper have to be from one SMG to the next to realize that damage or have an impact on your performance in actual gameplay? My experience has always been what happens on paper stays on paper, and in the Division 2, because of all of the variables, I just don't tend to experience those stats translating directly to my performance in actual gameplay. In other words, whether it's the #1 SMG or the #5 SMG for burst DPS on paper, my performance in the end ends up being the same. I clear the content in 3 to 5 minutes, or I clear the content in 3 to 5 minutes. My survivability ends up being the same. My time to clear ends up being the same. My time to kill is basically the same, down to the millimicrosecond, which is not enough to impact my gameplay performance, my time to clear, my survivability. That just makes you wonder, like, so whether it's #1 or #5 on paper, if my performance is the same, what does it really matter what it's ranked? And that's why I think to prove out builds and weapons in practice are much more important than relying on a piece of paper. So for me, when I'm checking out a weapon like the Banshee and saying, hey, is the juice worth the squeeze to start using this weapon and perhaps pumping some expertise into it as my go-to non-exotic SMG, well, we have to see. So with things on paper being the way it is, and with all the variables in practice, the reality is it's going to come down to the player, their skill level and play style, how aggressive they are, and how the weapon stands to contribute to the actual level of aggression that's being applied to it. And that's why in the end, you're going to be the one that determines what the best SMG is. And so I feel like the stats on paper are a great starting place, but the reality is you can basically go down the list of SMGs from the greatest to the worst on burst DPS, the greatest to the worst on sustained DPS, and the outcome will most likely be the same with little change to your performance based on your playstyle and skill level. And that can give you false results on what is the best or worst SMG in the Division 2 because it ends up being subjective. So what is the worst or the best just depends on your playstyle, meaning where you lie on the scale of burst DPS versus sustained DPS, dependent on your level of aggression. And another key thing we haven't discussed yet, the difficulty and type of content that you're playing. Heroic missions, for example, hardly has elites, and you're gonna kill many non-elites and veterans in a single mag. But when you play open world heroic content, you're up against quite the force. And in legendary content, SMGs are difficult. You have to be really aggressive with your SMG because legendary enemies play very deep and have huge health pools. And that's why for this testing, we're gonna run this as a user analysis versus something ultra scientific. Because the differences in DPS between all these SMGs is so small that the user's level of aggression and skill are gonna override any impact to the player's performance in actual gameplay. Let me quickly walk you through this SMG build because you're going to want to know. So I'm running Gunner, mostly for the armor on kill. And of course, the primary is the Banshee. I have crit mods throughout everywhere, as well as the larger mag. Damage to targets out of cover with killer. So if you look at our stats, that puts us at 58% crit chance and 170% crit damage when we have killer proc. Pretty good, 70% headshot damage. I like running striker with my SMG build, so I have 4 pieces of this. That's giving me weapon handling, faster reloads, love that, more shots on target, 15% rate of fire, and strikers gamble for amplified damage. I got crits everywhere with red core. On the gloves, I'm running armor with crit damage. On the knees, I got all reds, and the holster looks the same. So for the chest piece, I'm running Hunter Killer, which is a golem piece for status effects, which we don't need. I have an armor core and crits throughout, and Perfect Intimidate, which is giving us excellent damage here. And that's why I'm running Golem. That Perfect Intimidate ends up outperforming regular Intimidate on something like a Sokolov or a Cheska. But by no means do you have to run Perfect Intimidate. There's some great alternates. I know many of you don't have this chest piece. You have to beat all your New York hunters in order to get it. So if you're looking for an alternate, I would say a really good alternate is Palisades with either Obliterate or Intimidate. Try Intimidate though, I think you'll like it. But this is gonna give you 10% actual armor on kill, that pushes you to 20% armor on kill and then crits everywhere. And it comes with an armor core anyways. And then for the backpack, I'm running the Memento. And because it's a really good idea to have bonus armor with your SMGs, you can get it other ways too, but I choose the Memento because I'm also getting a damage lift at 5% weapon damage per red core. And we have 4 of those. So that's 20% damage lift on trophy pickup, which is happening all the time, and stacking, and then 30% weapon damage over the long term when you have full stacks. Tons of damage coming out of this. And then we're getting 3% armor regen, which is why I don't need too much armor on kill. And then we're getting 10% bonus armor on trophy pickup as well, which is like on kill. So we got 30% bonus armor on kill with 10% regular armor on kill with 3% armor regen happening. So that's a ton of survivability. Nice, it's good enough. And then I got skill efficiency happening too, which is helping our skills, helping our shield especially, as well as the decoy. I'm not really using the primary or the secondary here, but the rock and roll is a great shotgun to have as a backup. Okay, so here comes the hard part, is comparing these things. So we know one is better on paper. We can see it. The map tells us. It's there. Black and white. But now when you're in game where it really matters, what are we looking for? Well, the difference in our performance. And there has to be some sort of measurable stat there in order for us to make a comparison. Well, what's reasonable here? Personally, for me, time to clear is the ultimate stat. You would want to play the same content over and over, swapping just the weapons to see the time difference it takes to clear that content using that weapon versus the other. And by using time to clear, it would incorporate everything from time to kill and survivability. In other words, how many times you died. The downsides of using time to clear is the imperfection of the user. So we're not robots and we don't necessarily play perfect every time we attack a control point or whatever. Although with the tactical vector, my performance was better, clearing that control point a little over 30 seconds faster, which is significant when it only takes you minutes to clear a control point. I have to conclude based on the actual gameplay that a lot of that 30-second time difference is chalked up to where and when my actual engagement started. In other words, my first kill, as well as the random elements such as how close the enemy spawns were and the level of chasing enemies I had to do. So although it cleared this control point faster with the vector, we have to give grace and allow for a margin of error due to control points not dishing out enemies the same way every single time. Even with that being the case, my impressions is that the Banshee is actually better than the Dark Winter. One of the things is the reload. So although the 1.7 seconds is faster on the Dark Winter than the Banshee, I actually spend more time reloading with the Dark Winter because it doesn't land shots on target as well as the Banshee does at range. And so I'm getting more out of my mag from those farther distances with the Banshee, leading to me harvesting more meat inside a single mag. And that alone, I think, is the biggest difference. Basically optimal range. On paper, the Banshee shows a little better optimal range, but I think the weapon design is contributing a little bit more than what the damage drop off is representing here. But either way, it's leading to less time reloading. And I feel like that's the biggest difference in allowing me to clear content faster. I can reach farther, kill more targets just a few more meters out without wasting my mag. And then I have a bigger mag on top of that. Because I can kill just a little bit farther out, that means I'm decreasing the gap in between kills. And that leads me to grabbing a trophy and refreshing my bonus armor, which is helping the uptime on my chest talent. So when I'm stepping up to the next enemy, I'm coming at him at full strength. And killer seems to be more of a cherry on top. Okay, I'm gonna break this down on the real for you. We talk about these builds, we create these builds. You know, some people run all red strikers, all red hunter's fury, all powered up this, left and right, whatever. With the theme being just get good at the game, get good. And run all reds, you don't need any armor, any bonus armor, anything like that. A lot of that assumes perfect play style in a perfect game. But this game is far from perfect. I think we could all admit that. I'm not trying to harp on the game. I'm just trying to give you a hard reality. And the point of me giving you this reality is that it's going to be a factor on what is the better weapon. And nobody is going to tell you that. Nobody's going to tell you that out there. It's always missed. I don't know if it's because everybody wants to ignore that reality or if it's because that reality is really hard to measure or it's impossible to measure, basically. It is. I get it. Whatever the case, it's rarely discussed how imperfect this game is. And it's so easy and it's sort of a cop-out to say that numbers don't lie and choose this SMG because it's the best burst DPS. So it's going to give you the best advantage regardless of the situation because of that. But I find that not always to be the case because we're playing an imperfect game. So let me just give you an example because this is what I was thinking about when I was playing with the tactical vector versus the Banshee. If you run SMG run and gun builds, the shield is a popular skill to go with. It's free armor. It's about how the shield pairs up with your playstyle and your build. The problem with the shield is that it slows you down, and for survivability, you want to be fast and agile, maximizing the uptime of your buffs, whether it's the killer talent, the intimidate talent, or flat out just your bonus armor. You know, a lot of these things have 10, 15-second timers on them, and so the faster you are, the more juice you can squeeze out of those talents. So a good division player knows to pop in and out the shield as often as possible. So when you're looking to go from A to B, you want to drop your shield, run there, and then pop your shield back up. Okay, so we're popping the shield in and out. Good player habit to have. So here's where the imperfect game, those glitches, come along. There's something that happens in the game that I call a double reload glitch. We're inserting tactical reloads wherever we can. But when you tap reload, just before you tap that shield, if you're fast at it, which you want to be, the game sort of glitches and you'll reload, but when you pop up the shield, you'll end up reloading again. Even though your weapon is full, it goes through the reload animation, preventing you from shooting. It's not just a problem with the tactical vector. I'm not saying that. It's a problem across the board. What I am saying is that the Banshee, because of its larger mag and more shots on target, because I'm able to harvest more meat per mag before I have to reload, I'm not running into these, oh shit, I'm double reloading scenarios, which keeps happening with the vector. That, combined with the faster your RPMs, the better your DPS, but it also means more missed shots per second. When you're missing a target almost at 1400 RPMs, those are a lot of rounds expelled. And with the higher RPM SMG, you're usually going to get a lower base weapon damage, which means you need more rounds to kill a target. But if you're missing at a high RPM, you're reloading more often than you really want to, which isn't that bad if you got a faster reload, like 1.7 seconds, that's great. But because it's happening so often, you're spending more time reloading. And because of the reload glitch, and you're trying to stay agile by lowering and raising your shield over and over again so that you can tuck and roll or do whatever you got to do, you're catching those reload glitches also, which means you're spending tons of time reloading. In other words, tons of time not shooting. And because of the Banshee's stats and the way it pans out with my level of aggressiveness, it ends up being the better weapon, which is counterintuitive to what the metrics are telling you with my time to clear, which is why it's ultimately up to the user to determine which is the better weapon. That aside, I do gotta say I am impressed with the Banshee. Although it's not #1 in burst DPS and sustained DPS, and still I don't think it's my favorite non-exotic SMG, I do gotta say it's up there on my top SMGs. And compared to the tactical vector SBR 45 caliber, such as the Dark Winter, I gotta say I do like the Banshee better than the Dark Winter. That's an incredible thing to say because the Dark Winter is an incredible weapon. What do you guys think? Thank you for hanging out with me today. My name is Tuxedo Bandido, and this was another episode of The Division 2. If you found this video helpful, subscribe, like, and turn on notifications to ensure you don't miss out on the fantastic experiences waiting for you in The Division 2. And if you like builds like this, check out the recommended build video I have here for you. If you have anything you want to see covered, be sure to let me know in the comments below. And thank you to all the channel members and donors who make everything possible. Tux Nation wouldn't be without you.
When you buy a game from Ubisoft, enter the creator code Tuxedo Bandido to support the channel. Easy peasy.
Follow me.
I get it.